Lena was the kind of girl people often forgot was in the room. She never tried to make herself noticeable, and she rarely spoke unless someone asked her something directly. In school, she usually sat in the last row, keeping her notebooks neat and her eyes down. Even when the teacher asked the class something exciting, Lena would listen quietly but never raise her hand. She wasn't afraid, she simply didn't like being at the center of attention. Her classmates didn't dislike her, but they didn't pay much attention either. She blended into the background like a quiet shadow. The few times someone did speak to her, she would give a small smile and a short, soft answer. Many took that as a sign that she wasn't very confident or talented. Some even assumed she had nothing special to offer. But no one knew that every day after school she carried a small dream inside her heart. Something she had never shared with anyone. Lena loved music. It was something she had loved long before she understood what the word talent even meant. When she was younger, she used to sit beside her grandfather as he played an old wooden piano in their living room. It wasn't a fancy piano. Some keys were chipped, some notes sounded slightly off, and sometimes the pedal stuck. But to her, it felt magical. Her grandfather had passed away years ago, but the piano still stood in the same place, and Lena still touched the same keys he once touched. She remembered his warm hands guiding hers and the way he told her that music wasn't about showing off, but about feeling. Perhaps that was why she never felt the need to show her skills to anyone at school. Music was personal to her. She played it for herself, not for applause. Her school had a music class where students learned the basics of different instruments, but most people treated it like a break from their regular studies. Some were serious, but many just made noise, trying to be louder or funnier than the others. Whenever the teacher asked for volunteers to play something, hands shot up instantly. Everyone wanted to be seen, to show off whatever little tune they had learned. Everyone except Lena. She always stayed silent during these moments. She didn't want people staring at her. She didn't want to mess up and hear someone laugh. So she stayed in the back, practicing quietly when no one was watching. Some students even joked behind her back that she pretended to be in music class just to escape real subjects. She barely talks. She probably can't even play properly. I bet she just touches the keys randomly at home. She never performed. She's too shy. These were small whispers, but Lena had heard enough over time to know exactly what people thought of her. She didn't hold grudges. She wasn't angry. But she did sometimes feel a little sad, not because people underestimated her, but because no one ever tried to know her beyond what they could see. One afternoon, their teacher walked in with a big announcement. He clapped his hands and asked the class to settle down. The room buzzed with energy because he rarely made announcements unless something important was happening. This year, he said with excitement, we're arranging a school performance event. Students from all classes will get the chance to show their musical abilities. Everyone will perform something on stage. The room exploded with chatter. Some students cheered. Others started debating which songs they should pick. A few even whipped out their instruments immediately. Lena froze. Everyone had to perform. On stage? In front of the whole school? For a moment, her heart sank. She didn't want to imagine herself standing on a stage with hundreds of eyes staring at her. She didn't want the pressure of people judging her or expecting her to be perfect. And she certainly didn't want to hear whispers if she played a wrong note. Her hands felt cold just thinking about it. As the class discussed their ideas, a few students glanced toward the back of the room. One boy smirked and whispered loudly enough for others to hear, I wonder if Lena will even show up. She's probably scared to touch the piano in front of people. Another student laughed and added, maybe she just skipped the event. Or maybe she pressed one key and run away. A small group burst into quiet giggles. Lena pretended she didn't hear them. She kept her eyes on her notebook, but inside something stung. She never claimed to be better than anyone else, yet people judged her so quickly just because she was quiet. Just because she didn't show off? Just because she didn't talk loudly. The teacher continued explaining the rules of the event, but Lena barely heard any of it. Her mind was spinning with questions. Should she ask the teacher to let her skip? Should she pretend to be sick that day? Should she pick the simplest tune just to get it over with? Or should she finally gather the courage to show a part of herself that no one knew? On the walk home, she felt lost in her thoughts. The noise of traffic, the hum of people talking, the sound of vendors calling out, it all blurred together. Everything felt heavier than usual. When she reached home, her mother noticed right away that something was bothering her. "Long day?" her mother asked kindly. Lena nodded. She didn't want to explain too much, but her mother had always been able to sense her feelings without needing many words. She gently placed a hand on Lena's shoulder and asked, "Did something happen at school?" It took a few seconds before Lena finally whispered, "We all have to perform something." In front of everyone. Her mother looked surprised at first, then smiled gently. "That sounds like a nice opportunity." "Not for me," Lena muttered. Her mother didn't push. She simply asked, "Do you want to do it?" Lena didn't know how to answer. She wanted to play music. That part was true. She just didn't want the pressure. She didn't want the laughter. She didn't want the fear. Instead of answering, she walked toward the old piano in the living room and slowly lifted the wooden cover. Dust rose slightly from the keys. She placed her fingers on them, letting her hands rest gently. Every time she touched the piano, she felt connected to something peaceful inside herself. The memories of her grandfather warmed her heart. She pressed one key, then another. Soft notes floated into the room. Her mother didn't interrupt. She knew this was how Lena sorted her feelings. The more she played, the more her breathing steadied. The fear didn't disappear, but something else started growing inside her, something she couldn't explain in words. It wasn't confidence yet, but it felt like a small spark. Later that evening, when she finally stopped playing, she whispered to herself, maybe I should try. It wasn't a decision yet, but it was a beginning. The next day at school, the same loud and confident students were already practicing for the event. Some joked loudly. Others played random notes just to grab attention. Many of them believed they were the stars of the upcoming performance. No one expected anything from Lena. No one even asked her what she planned to perform. It was almost as if people had already decided she would either do something boring or not perform well at all, but something had changed in her. She wasn't suddenly bold or fearless. She was still shy, still worried, still unsure. But she was also tired of letting fear make decisions for her. Tired of letting people assume she had nothing to offer. After classes ended, she stayed back in the empty music room. She sat at the school piano, touching the keys slowly. The room was quiet, and for once, she wasn't thinking about what others would say. She was thinking about what she wanted to express. She didn't know what the final performance would look like yet. She didn't know whether she would impress anyone. But in that quiet moment, she knew one thing clearly. She didn't want to be underestimated forever. She wanted to truly play at least once in front of others. Not to show off, not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove to herself that she could. That small spark inside her grew just a little brighter. After that day in the empty music room, something inside Lena began to shift. She didn't become a new person overnight, but she felt a small push, like a gentle hand on her back telling her to take one step forward. Even though she was still nervous, she decided she would at least try to prepare for the school performance. She didn't tell anyone her decision. Not her classmates, not her teacher, not even her family. She kept it quietly inside her. Like a small secret she wasn't ready to share. Every afternoon after school, she began staying longer in the music room. Most students rushed out as soon as the bell rang, their voices echoing down the hallway. But Lena waited. She would sit quietly and pretend she was organizing her bag or writing something, just so she wouldn't leave with the crowd. After most students were gone, she slipped back into the room and closed the door softly behind her. The silence inside made her feel safe. Like the room understood her. She always started by sitting quietly at the piano without touching the keys. She closed her eyes and took a slow breath. She knew that if she rushed into playing, her nerves would only get worse. So she tried to calm herself first. When she finally placed her fingers on the keys, she let her hands move slowly, gently, without thinking too much about perfection. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was trying to reconnect with the feeling. she used to have when she played with her grandfather. That warm, peaceful feeling. For the first few days, she kept practicing simple melodies, trying to build her confidence back up. But she knew that for the school performance, she needed something more meaningful, something that would show her true feelings. She didn't want to play a popular tune everyone already knew. She wanted something that felt like her, something honest. After many days of practicing, she finally chose a melody. It wasn't something she had learned from a book. It was something she slowly built herself, little by little, combining the soft tones she loved with the emotional chords she remembered her grandfather teaching her. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't fast. But it was gentle, smooth, and full of feeling. When she played it, she felt like she was telling a story without needing any words. Still, she wasn't sure if anyone else would understand it. One afternoon while she practiced, she didn't realize that the music teacher had entered the room. He stood silently at the back, watching her. He had never seen her stay after class, and he had certainly never heard her play so beautifully. But he didn't interrupt. He let her finish. When she finally lifted her fingers from the keys and turned around, she froze when she saw him standing there. He gave her a warm smile and said, "I didn't know you played like that." She didn't know what to say. She lowered her eyes, her face growing warm with embarrassment. He stepped closer and spoke gently. "You don't have to hide your talent. What you played just now, it had real emotion." She swallowed nervously and whispered, "I'm still practicing." "That's good," he replied. "Everyone should practice." "But you have something special, Lena. I hope you won't hold yourself back." She nodded slightly, though she wasn't sure she believed him. Compliments often made her uncomfortable. She didn't know how to respond to them. But she appreciated his kindness. He didn't pressure her to talk more or to perform for him. Before leaving the room, he simply said, "Keep working on it. You have time." His words stayed with her. They didn't magically remove her fear, but they gave her a little more strength. When she got home that day, she sat at her family's old piano again. This time, she didn't feel as stressed. She played the same melody she had practiced at school, and the sound filled the quiet living room. Her mother passed by the door and paused for a moment. She didn't interrupt, she just listened quietly, surprised by how much her daughter had grown in her music. She didn't say anything right away because she didn't want to break the calm atmosphere. Later, when Lena finished playing, her mother placed a cup of warm tea on the table beside her and said, "That sounded beautiful." Lena looked down shyly but smiled. It meant a lot to her. Even though she hadn't told her mother about the performance yet, she felt comfort knowing she had silent support at home. The next day at school, the atmosphere was different. Students were getting louder as the performance date came closer. Many were trying to outdo each other, showing off their favorite parts of their songs. Some practiced so loudly that it was hard to hear anything else in the room. A few students even joked that the event would be like a competition rather than a performance. Few whispering groups talked openly about how certain classmates would perform. Some boasted about how they would get the loudest applause. Others laughed about how nervous people would embarrass themselves. Whenever Lena walked past these groups, their conversations paused for a moment. She could feel their eyes on her. She heard someone whisper, "Do you think she's even going to try?" Another person shrugged, "I doubt it. She doesn't even talk. How will she survive on stage?" A few chuckles followed. Lena didn't react. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she didn't want to give those words any power. Their judgment wasn't about her, it was about what they thought a quiet person was capable of. She kept repeating to herself, "I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing this for me." Still, some days were harder than others. Some days she felt confident and strong. Other days her fear felt heavier. She kept imagining herself standing on stage, her hands trembling, her mind going blank, the whole room staring at her. She even dreamed about it sometimes, waking up nervous in the middle of the night, but every morning she kept going back to the music room after class. And every afternoon she kept practicing at home. Step by step, little by little, she began to believe she could really do it. One afternoon, she noticed another student entering the music room while she was practicing. It was a girl from another class, someone Lena had seen around but never spoken to. She seemed nervous as she approached. Sorry, the girl said softly. I heard you play sometimes. I just wanted to say, your music is really calming. Lena blinked, surprised. She didn't expect anyone to say something like that. Most people didn't pay attention to her at all. Thank you, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The girl smiled and left without saying more. It was a small moment, but it warmed Lena's heart. Maybe not everyone underestimated her. Maybe some people quietly appreciated her, even if they never spoke up. As the days passed, the performance date grew closer. Posters were put up around the school. The hall was being decorated. The stage lights were tested. Students practiced with growing excitement or anxiety. The teacher reminded everyone to stay serious and respectful. Though he looked amused by their noisy enthusiasm, Lena's classmates still didn't know what she was preparing. Some assumed she would perform something very basic. Others believed she might not show up at all. But she didn't tell them anything. She didn't owe anyone an explanation. There was one day, however, that stood out. While she was practicing alone, she hit a wrong note. It wasn't a big mistake, but for some reason it broke her rhythm completely. She stopped playing and stared at her hands. The old fear rushed back in. What if this happened on stage? What if she played the wrong note in front of everyone? What if she froze? She felt her chest tighten. Her eyes grew warm as tears threatened to fall. She wiped them quickly, embarrassed even though no one was watching. She leaned forward, resting her forehead on her hands, trying to breathe. She almost gave up in that moment, but then she remembered something her grandfather used to say, music isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. Even mistakes can have meaning if your heart is in the right place. She lifted her head slowly and took a deep breath. She placed her hands back on the keys. And she started playing again, not to be perfect, but to keep going. The melody flowed again, and she felt her nerves ease. She realized that fear didn't mean she wasn't capable. It just meant she cared deeply about what she was doing. By the time she finished practicing that day, she felt stronger than when she started. Day by day, she continued to build her confidence. She didn't brag, didn't talk about her progress, didn't share videos or recordings like some of her classmates. She didn't need to. Her journey was personal, quiet, steady. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't running away from fear, she was walking through it. A few days before the performance, her teacher called the class together and reminded them about the importance of giving their best. As he spoke, Lena listened carefully. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, but she wanted to honor the effort she had put in. She owed that much to herself. That night she practiced for hours. Not just the melody, but her posture, her breathing, the way she placed her hands. She imagined the stage, the lights, the audience. She imagined walking to the piano confidently. She knew she would still be scared on the actual day, but she wanted to be ready. When she finally went to bed, she felt tired, but peaceful. She had done everything she could. The rest would happen when it happened. She drifted off to sleep, unaware that the performance she feared so much would become a moment that changed everything, not just for her, but for everyone who had ever underestimated her. The morning of the performance arrived faster than Lena expected. For days, she had counted the hours, preparing herself little by little. But when she opened her eyes that morning, it felt unreal. The event was no longer something far away. It was today. Her heart beat a little faster as she sat up in bed. She tried to steady her breathing, reminding herself that she had practiced for this. She had worked hard. She had prepared. But even with all that, nerves still found their way into her chest. Her mother knocked on the door gently and entered with a soft smile. "Big day," she said warmly. Lena nodded. She didn't trust her voice yet. Her mother placed a warm hand on her shoulder and squeezed it gently. "You'll be fine. Just remember why you love music." Those words helped more than anything else. They reminded her that she wasn't doing this to impress anyone. She wasn't doing it to compete. She was doing it because music lived inside her. Because she wanted to let that piece of herself finally be heard, she dressed carefully and packed her small bag. She took deep breaths every few minutes. Her hands felt cold, so she kept rubbing them together. Right before leaving the house, she paused at the old piano in the living room. She touched one key lightly. A soft note filled the room. It wasn't a full practice session, just a small reminder of home, of where it all started. When she reached school, the halls were buzzing. Students from different classes were rushing around, carrying their instruments, testing their microphones, adjusting their outfits, practicing loudly in corners. The air felt heavy with excitement and nerves. Some students were laughing loudly, trying to cover up how nervous they actually were. Others sat quietly, repeating their lines or notes. As Lena walked through the hall, a few students looked at her curiously. They seemed surprised to see her carrying her music sheet folder. She overheard someone whisper, "She is actually performing?" Another voice replied, "Maybe she just plays something simple. Nothing special." She kept walking, pretending she didn't hear them. She didn't allow their voices to settle in her heart. Today wasn't about proving anything to them. Today was about facing her fear. Inside the main hall, the stage was set up with bright lights and rows of chairs for the audience. Teachers moved around, checking arrangements and making last-minute adjustments. The sound team tested microphones again and again. Students lined up backstage, ready to perform one after another. The hall began to fill with parents, siblings, and teachers. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder. The sound of chairs being adjusted, footsteps echoing, and people greeting each other created a busy, lively atmosphere. Lena found a quiet corner backstage to sit. She placed her music sheet on her lap and looked at it even though she already knew it by heart. Her hands shook slightly, so she closed her eyes and took slow, deep breaths. She reminded herself of the hours she spent practicing. She remembered the calm moments when she played at home. She remembered her grandfather's words about music coming from the heart. One by one, the performers went on stage. Some students played their guitars. Some performed upbeat songs. Others sang confidently. The audience clapped loudly after every performance. The sound of applause made Lena's heart beat even faster, not because she wanted it, but because she knew her turn was getting closer. A few of her classmates performed before her. They walked on stage confidently, waving at the audience, smiling brightly. One boy misplayed a note and made a joke about it. The audience laughed kindly. Another girl froze for a moment but managed to continue. The teacher encouraged her softly from the side of the stage. Watching them made Lena feel a little better. They weren't perfect, but they kept going. Maybe she could too. Finally, the teacher called out her name. Everything went quiet in her mind. Her ears felt hot and her legs felt heavy. But she stood up slowly, holding her music sheet. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't hide it. She took one small step, then another. Her feet felt like they were sinking into the floor with every move. The stage lights felt distant at first, like she was walking toward another world. When she stepped onto the stage, she didn't look at the audience. She kept her eyes low, focused only on the piano waiting for her in the center. But from the corner of her eye, she saw people leaning slightly forward, whispering to each other. Some were curious, some were doubtful, some were amused, some were already. Assuming she wouldn't do well, she took a slow breath and walked to the piano seat. Her legs felt weak, but she lowered herself gently onto the bench. She placed her sheet carefully on the stand. She adjusted her hands on her lap for a moment, feeling their trembling. She closed her eyes for a few seconds. She reminded herself of the quiet room at home, the old wooden piano, her grandfather's gentle voice. Then she placed her fingers on the keys. At first, she didn't press anything. She just felt the cool surface of the keys under her fingertips. The hall was quiet, unusually quiet. Even the whispers faded. Everyone waited. Then she played the first note. It was soft, almost too soft. But it was clear. A few more notes followed, smooth and gentle. The melody unfolded slowly. Like a small stream flowing over stones, the room grew even quieter. She continued, letting the melody move at its own pace. It wasn't a fast or complicated tune. It didn't try to show off. but it held something deeper, something warm, honest, emotional. Her fingers trembled at first, but as the music continued, they steadied. Her body relaxed. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Her breathing became calm. She forgot about the audience. She forgot about the whispers. She forgot about the fear. All she remembered was why she loved this piano, why she loved music, why she had spent hours practicing alone. Every key she pressed carried a piece of her heart, a memory, a feeling. The melody grew richer, deeper. She added a gentle rise, then softened it again, letting it fall like a quiet sigh. Each note blended with the next in a smooth, peaceful flow. The hall was filled with a calm, warm sound. Even the restless students in the audience stopped fidgeting. Some teachers exchanged surprised glances. A few students who had doubted her earlier leaned forward with wide eyes. Someone whispered, "I didn't know she could play like this." Another voice said softly, "She's really good." "I never knew." But Lena didn't hear any of it. She was somewhere else entirely, lost in the world her music created. When she reached the middle part of her melody, there was a slight hesitation in her fingers. A familiar fear rose for a moment. What if she messed up? What if she hit the wrong note? But then she reminded herself, the music was hers. It didn't need to be perfect. It needed to be sincere. She pressed the next key gently, and everything flowed again. The melody softened, then rose, then softened once more like a quiet conversation of emotions. Her fingers moved gracefully across the keys, dancing lightly at moments and holding firmly at others. The room seemed to breathe with her. When the final part came, she slowed down. The last few notes were delicate, almost like whispers. She let them linger in the air for a moment. Before lifting her hands from the keys, then there was silence, not an awkward silence, a powerful silence, a silence that comes when people are deeply moved and don't know what to say at first. For a few seconds, Lena didn't move. She kept her eyes on her hands, afraid to look up. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. She wondered if she had done well enough or if everyone was simply too shocked to react. Then suddenly, applause burst through the hall, not weak, not polite, not forced, real applause. Loud, warm, full applause. Some people stood. Some cheered. The sound washed over her like a wave. She looked up slowly, unsure if it was truly happening. She saw surprised faces, smiling faces, admiring faces. Even the classmates who doubted her were clapping with stunned expressions. Her teacher had tears in his eyes and clapped with both hands over his head, for the first time in a long time. Lena felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel. Pride. Not in a loud way, not in an arrogant way, just a quiet, gentle pride in knowing she had done something she thought she couldn't do. She stood up slowly, bowed her head politely, and walked off the stage. Her legs were shaking again, but for a very different reason. Every step felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her heart. Behind the curtains, she took a deep breath. Her hands were trembling, but she smiled softly to herself. She had done it. She had faced her fear. She had shared her music, and she had finally been heard. When Lena stepped backstage after her performance, her hands were still trembling slightly, but her heart felt lighter than ever before. She had expected to feel embarrassed or overwhelmed, but instead she felt a calm warmth spreading through her chest. She took a slow breath, trying to understand what had just happened. She had played in front of the whole school, something she never thought she could do, and instead of laughter or judgment, she had received applause. Real applause. The memory of the sound stayed with her like a soft echo inside her mind. She found a chair near the corner of the backstage area and sat down for a moment, trying to steady herself. She touched her fingertips gently, still feeling the warmth of the piano keys in them. She couldn't help but smile a little. For someone like her, who rarely stood in the spotlight, this moment felt almost unreal. A few minutes later, one of the teachers walked over to her. She wasn't her main teacher, but had always been kind whenever she met her in the halls. She leaned down slightly and said with genuine warmth, "That was beautiful, Lena. You played with so much heart." Lena looked up shyly and thanked her. She wasn't used to receiving praise, so she didn't know how to respond fully. She simply lowered her eyes and gave a small smile. But inside, she felt grateful. Soon enough, the next performer was called on stage, and the event kept moving forward. People clapped and cheered again for the next acts. But Lena stayed seated backstage, listening to the faint sounds coming from the hall. The applause now felt different to her, not something she feared, but something she understood. It wasn't about competition or popularity. It was simply people appreciating what others shared. A few of her classmates found her after their own performances. Some looked unsure of what to say, as if they didn't know how to treat her now that they had heard her play. One of them finally said, "You were really good." "I didn't know you could play like that." Another added, "Yeah, seriously, that was unexpected." Their words weren't perfect, but they came from genuine surprise and respect. Lena nodded politely and thanked them. She didn't take their reactions too personally. She knew they hadn't meant harm before, they simply didn't know who she really was. After the event ended, the hall slowly emptied. Families left with smiles, teachers congratulated students, and kids ran around showing off pictures and videos taken during performances. The air was filled with excitement and chatter. Lena waited until most people had gone before stepping outside. She moved slowly through the hallway, holding her music sheet carefully. Her mind replayed the moments on stage over and over, the silence before she started, the calm flow of the melody, the shock in people's eyes, the applause at the end. Each memory made her heart flutter. As she walked toward the school gate, she noticed her mother waiting for her. She stood near one of the benches, wrapped in a shawl, her face brightening as she saw her daughter approach. "How did it go?" her mother asked, though she could already guess from the shy smile on Lena's face. Lena lowered her eyes and whispered, "It went well." Her mother reached out, held her hands gently, and said, "I'm proud of you." Those 4 words washed over Lena more deeply than applause ever could. She felt her throat tighten slightly, but in a good way. She leaned into her mother's embrace for a moment, allowing herself to feel the warmth she had earned on the way home. She replayed every detail for her mother, the trembling hands, the quiet hall, the melody, the applause. Her mother listened carefully, smiling the entire time, adding small comments like, "I knew you could," or "See, your heart knew what to do." When they reached home, the old piano waited silently in the living room. Lena paused to look at it. She touched the wood gently and let her fingers rest on the keys. This piano had seen her grow. It had heard her fears, her frustrations, her hopes. It had held her memories of her grandfather. And now it had become the beginning of something new. That evening, as the sun slowly set, her mother prepared tea while Lena sat at the piano and played softly. Not a performance piece, just a calm, simple melody she made up on the spot. The house felt peaceful, and her mother listened from the kitchen, smiling quietly. She didn't interrupt. She knew music was Lena's way of breathing. The next day at school, things felt different. Not dramatically, people didn't suddenly crowd around her or treat her like a celebrity, but they greeted her with respect. They looked at her differently, not with doubt or indifference, but with understanding. For the first time, many of them noticed her not as the quiet girl in the back, but as someone with real skill, real emotion, real depth. A few students approached her before class started. "You played really beautifully yesterday," one said. Another added, "Honestly, that was one of the best performances." Some were still shy, unsure of how to talk to her, but they were trying. Lena appreciated their effort. She wasn't used to attention, and she didn't want too much of it. But a gentle acknowledgement felt nice. Her teacher met her in the hallway and smiled proudly. "I didn't know you had such a gift," he said. "You should share it more often." Lena gave a small smile. "I'll try," she whispered, though she wasn't promising anything to herself just yet. During music class, the atmosphere was lighter. Students talked excitedly about the event. Some replayed funny moments, others discussed their mistakes or worries. When the teacher talked about the importance of expressing emotion through music, he glanced at Lena meaningfully. She lowered her eyes, feeling shy again, but she couldn't stop a tiny smile from forming. Later that week, the school uploaded the performance videos on their website. Lena didn't watch her own at first. She didn't want to relive the nerves. But one evening, curiosity won. She opened the video gently, almost like opening a book she wasn't sure she was ready to read. She watched herself walk onto the stage nervous, quiet, almost shaking. She watched herself sit at the piano and take a deep breath. She saw the audience waiting silently. When her fingers began to move, she remembered exactly what she felt in that moment. Then she watched the room fall silent. Completely captured by her playing dot by the time the video ended, she felt something shift inside her. She didn't see a scared girl. She didn't see someone who didn't belong on a stage. She saw someone who had courage, even if it was gentle. Quiet courage. She realized then that courage didn't always look powerful or loud. Sometimes courage was small, trembling hands pressing a piano key in front of a crowd. Sometimes it was standing in front of people even when your voice shook. Sometimes it was choosing to try. Even when fear told you not to, a few teachers mentioned her performance in passing, saying things like, "You surprised us all," or "Your music was very heartfelt." One even suggested she join the school's small music club. Lena didn't give an answer right away. She wanted to think. But the fact that someone invited her meant more than she showed. Weeks passed, and the excitement around the event faded for most students. But for Lena, something inside her had changed permanently. She still sat in the back of the class, still spoke softly, still preferred quiet moments. But she didn't hide herself anymore. She found small ways to participate more. She greeted classmates more comfortably. She didn't lower her eyes every time someone looked at her. She didn't shrink into the background as much as before. One afternoon, her teacher asked if she could play something for the class. She felt a small wave of nervousness, but she didn't panic. She simply nodded. When she sat at the piano, she took a breath and played a short, light melody. The class listened quietly, and when she finished, they clapped without hesitation. It wasn't a big performance, but it felt good. At home, her mother noticed the change too. Lena talked a little more during dinner. She smiled more. She practiced music not out of fear, but out of joy. The house felt brighter with her melodies. One evening, her mother sat beside her on the couch and said softly, "You've grown." Lena didn't respond at first. She just looked at her hands and then at the piano. She felt something warm inside her chest. She finally whispered, "I just needed to try." Her mother nodded gently. "And you did." Lena smiled quietly, feeling proud. Months later, when another school event was announced, everyone looked excited. This time, however, Lena didn't feel scared. She wasn't sure if she wanted to perform again yet, but she didn't feel the same fear she once felt. She knew she could if she wanted to. That confidence alone was enough. Her classmates no longer underestimated her. They no longer saw her as the invisible girl who sat in the back. They had heard her music, and it had spoken louder than her words ever could. They saw her as someone with talent, someone with depth, someone with a voice, even if that voice came through melodies instead of spoken sentences. But more importantly, Lena no longer underestimated herself. She realized that being quiet didn't mean being weak. Being shy didn't mean lacking strength. And being unnoticed didn't mean being unimportant. She understood that her music didn't just fill the room that day, it filled a space inside her own heart. She had kept closed for too long. Her life didn't change dramatically overnight. She didn't suddenly become famous or confident or outspoken. But she grew. Slowly, steadily, honestly. And that growth meant everything. The girl who once hid in silence now carried her own quiet light. A light that came from music, a light that came from courage, a light that came from finally believing in herself.